I think there's something there with Bryce Young, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's going to be a top 5 quarterback, but I'm interested to see what you guys think, because I think his confidence level resembles the player he was at the end of last year.
I'm not as high on Bryce Young as Joe. I wish he was running a little bit more. That was where he was getting a lot of his production at the end of last season. The passing yards, I mean, he's top 200 yards just once so far. We need a little bit more passing yardage production from him.
Yeah, I'm sort of with Tom on this one, where last year with the smash weeks we saw over the second half of the year all involved Bryce Young scoring a bunch of rushing touchdowns, getting some rushing yards. If we see that return, I think he'd be on the streaming radar.
I think you can do worse than Bryce Young.
What? Why are you shaking your head? You're welcome.
Week 7 waiver wire additions, players that you can get through the week, players that can help you in your flex, and deep sleepers to improve your fantasy football roster. Theo Greminger with Tom Brawley and Joe Dolan every week here at Fantasy Points, Fantasy Football Daily, and on Fantasy Points YouTube. Tom, we talked about it last week. We told everybody to go and add Kendrick Bourne. We didn't necessarily think that lightning would strike twice here. Kendrick Bourne, another huge week. How excited are you to add him on the waiver wire, especially knowing now about the extensive injuries that Jauan Jennings is playing through?
Yeah, Jennings did not look right trying to play through the injuries. Then he let loose after the game that he's playing through 5 broken ribs, a high ankle sprain, and a low ankle sprain. Missed a lot of training camp as well. This has been an ongoing situation with his health. So he's playing real banged up, and he's trying to play through it. I'll give him some credit, but he's not playing very effectively. It's Kendrick Bourne has been the guy that has stepped up for this offense, and Ricky Pearsall is dealing with his own injuries right now. Has a PCL injury that's really difficult for these guys to play through. A lot of times they have to sit out multiple weeks, and we haven't seen him in the lineup weeks 5 and 6. We'll see if he's able to return in week 7, but Bourne has been the guy that's kind of carried this offense. They're struggling to run the ball a little bit with Christian McCaffrey. It's been a very pass-heavy offense so far this year, even with a backup quarterback in Mac Jones. So I think Bourne needs to be rostered. We'll see how it all plays out. The 49ers have injuries all across the board. We'll see if Pearsall's ready to come back in week 7. George Kittle, it sounds like they're going to open his practice window. Jauan Jennings, we'll see if he's going to gut through this injury and play again in week 7. We also have the quarterback situation. That's been a big part of it for Kendrick Bourne. It's playing with Mac Jones. He has a lot of familiarity with him up in New England, and that's really shown the last couple of weeks. But it does sound like Brock Purdy could come back. So lots of moving pieces here, but the one thing we know for sure is Kendrick Bourne is healthy, and he's playing really well. So he should be on rosters, and if Pearsall or Jennings miss again this week, I'm going to have some confidence playing Kendrick Bourne. So he should be rostered. This isn't a fluke here with a couple of back-to-back 100-yard performances.
Joe, you were all over Kendrick Bourne last week. I think a lot of people realize that Kendrick Bourne is going to be a very useful player for us against Atlanta here in week 7. Your thoughts on Kendrick Bourne potentially being viable for the rest of the season, or is that a little bit of wishful thinking?
Well, maybe, Theo, I know that it's a different team, but I have to come from the perspective of what happened to me on the Sunday night football game between the Chiefs and the Lions, where Tyquan Thornton, who had scored, I think, in like 3 of 4 games and had such a preposterously low prop bet line, and then gets goose-egged because all of a sudden the Chiefs are getting a little bit healthier with Xavier Worthy, and then they're running multiple tight end sets. And I just wonder, if in the event that Ricky Pearsall comes back, I don't know when Brandon Ayuk's going to come back, if at all, but when Ricky Pearsall comes back, if Jauan Jennings continues to play through these injuries, if the 49ers are going to go back to their plan before they even signed Kendrick Bourne early in the season when they needed to deal with some of these injuries. But for right now, I'm willing to take the gamble. He's been Mac Jones's guy. The question also becomes, what happens if he's not Brock Purdy's guy? So there's a couple of factors going here, but the fact of the matter remains is he's got to be rostered in basically every league until we're proven wrong.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And We talked about the injuries with Juwan Jennings. Let's talk about some incredibly significant injuries. Puka Nacua, it looks like he's going to miss this week's game, the London game. Then you've got the bye week coming up. There's potential that I've seen some speculation this could be a few weeks for Nacua. We don't have all the answers. And again, we record this early on Monday morning. A lot of times we get news dumps in the afternoon. So hopefully we'll have some Puka Nacua clarity. But I would be very surprised if we see Puka playing in London. Is Jordan Whittington a sneaky name for fantasy managers looking for a spot start this week? Let's start out with you on this one, Joe.
So we actually have a little bit of news here. Good timing, Theo, on that, because Sarah Barshop, who covers the Rams for ESPN, Sean McVay said Puka Nacua will be day-to-day with an ankle sprain, and his game status is uncertain, quote, for week 7. McVay said Nacua, quote, felt pretty good today on Monday, and that the medical staff was, quote, encouraged by the scans. But the Rams will see how the week progresses with the injury. I still think your conclusion is probably correct. They have the international game, I believe, and then a bye. So I think that's an opportunity for them to hit reset on Puka Nacua. If you'll remember, they tried to bring him back too early from a PCL injury last year, and he's a guy who plays with reckless abandon, so he's got to be protected from himself at times. So I wouldn't expect him to play this week. But another piece of news here, not that he's a 1-for-1 for Puka Nacua, is that Sean McVay said Tutu Atwell, who missed in week 6, is expected to play in week 7. So that's another complicating factor here. Now, if I'm desperate, can I put Jordan Whittington into a lineup? Yes, but ultimately, I think the biggest beneficiary is going to be Davante Adams.
Yeah, absolutely. But I do see Whittington as kind of a handcuff for Puka Nacua. He's going to play in the slot. He's that bigger type of receiver. Very, some similar traits there. So I think the Rams are going to take it cautious here, especially with that off week coming. He's collected a lot of targets and catches already, taken a lot of hits. So it does make some sense to let him rest, get him back to 100% through the bye week, and let Jordan Whittington kind of take over that position for a week. See if you can get by. It's a game against the Jaguars, so it should be a good game. But I think this is an opportunity for Puka to get a little bit of rest. So I would be planning. He's been the wide receiver 1 through the first 6 weeks. Has been a fantasy difference maker, but I would be planning not to have him for the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, for me, I think I might like Whittington a little bit more than Atwell. I know Atwell's been a preferred target of Stafford. He's made some really, really big plays. I just think Whittington, we've seen it in the preseason. We've seen it a little bit last year in a couple of those starts where he's not Puka Nacua, but a couple of the things Puka Nacua can do, they might emulate with Whittington. I think both are sort of reasonable dart throw speculation plays, but I think Joe's absolutely right. It could end up being a 15-target Davante Adams game, so don't go spending too much FAAB here. This is sort of a short-term proposition. Another big, massive injury that we've got, that's sort of the theme of this week, guys, is talking about injuries to awesome wide receivers in fantasy. Emeka Egbuka with a hamstring injury. There's been a number of reports here saying that Egbuka, they don't believe it's going to be too serious, but it does sound like something where he's going to miss time. We could go all over the place with this one. We'll make this a 2-part question. We'll start out with you on this one, Tom. If, let's say, Egbuka misses this week, we already know Chris Godwin's injured, Mike Evans injured. Now you've got all 3 of the wide receivers that we would say is the 1, 2, 3 in Tampa Bay are most likely out this week. You've got Cameron Johnson, who finished with 4 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown. You've got Tez Johnson, who caught 1 ball, but it was a beautiful downfield catch where it was a 45-yard touchdown. Then you got Sterling Shepard, who's been solid this year, sort of what he does when he gets opportunities. Minimal production this past week, 50 yards, but only 2 catches. If you specifically were looking for a 1-week Tampa Bay Buck wide receiver start this week against Detroit on the road, which one of these wide receivers would you bet on?
Yeah, I prefer Tez Johnson. It's pretty wild to think back, though, to April during the draft when they selected Emeka Egbuka. And now we were like, what are they doing? They have all these wide receivers already. And now all 4 of them are out if you throw in Jalen McMillan. It's unbelievable. But now a guy that they also selected in the draft, Tez Johnson, who was viewed mostly as a special teams player, he's kind of the number one wide receiver now. And he played the most snaps out of this group last week in week 6. His snaps have been on the rise because of these injuries as well. So had the long touchdown reception, the 45-yard score where he ran down the seam. And I think he's the guy that benefits the most. He is going to be a little more boom or bust, though. If you want to go for the safer guy, the guy that's probably going to get you 4 catches for 50 receiving yards, that's Sterling Shepard. But he's not going to do probably a whole lot more than that. Maybe he catches you a touchdown. But if I'm shooting for upside this week, I would look to Tez Johnson because of that rising route share the last couple of weeks and because of his big playability.
Joe, we were down in Mobile, the 3 of us, along with Brett Whitefield and John Hansen for the Senior Bowl. Tez Johnson was really impressive there. Tez Johnson also really impressive collegiate. Sort of the profile didn't match up for the pros. Ran slower 40 than you needed, and he's tiny. But yeah, I mean, I think it's Baker Mayfield magic. Tez is interesting, but what are your thoughts on Cade Otton? First of all, we can stream a lot of tight ends against San Francisco. A number of guys have done well against this 49ers defense this year. But Cade Otton with 5 catches for 51 yards. Last year, Cade Otton provided a great deal of fantasy utility with some upside performances attached to Baker Mayfield when he had an opportunity to step in for injured Bucs wide receivers in sort of the target pecking order. Do you think this could be a big boost to Cade Otton?
Yeah, I actually think that might be the way to go here with Tez Johnson. I think Sterling Shepard is probably going to be the most consistent chain mover of the guys who are left over at wide receiver. I had never even heard, quite frankly, of Cameron Johnson before yesterday. I was on the Game Day show, and I had mentioned to Paul Kelly that I threw Tez Johnson in a DFS lineup because of the injuries that they had, and this was even before Egbuka went out. And I saw Johnson score a touchdown, and I'm like, oh, there's Tez Johnson. And then I checked my my DFS lineup, and I still had a 0. And I'm like, well, DraftKings, you're a little slow to refresh there. And then I realized it wasn't Tez Johnson, that the Buccaneers have 2 Johnsons. And if you have 2 Johnsons, there's probably another line of work you can get into. But the Buccaneers had 2 different Johnsons, and Tez Johnson ended up coming through with a touchdown. But I think, Theo, you mentioned Cade Otton last year. He stepped up when they had injuries. He was the guy who Baker Mayfield kind of gravitated to when those receivers were out. And Baker Mayfield is playing at a level right now where if the production isn't there from where they game planned it to be, he's going to go find it elsewhere. And I would think Cade Otton is going to be the top beneficiary. Just throw him into that pile, that tight end 6 to tight end 18 pile, where you could pick any card out from the deck, and there's a reasonable expectation that that card is going to be that week's ace. So throw Cade Otton into that pile.
Yeah, I like Cade Otton. I think he's interesting. A very funny Tez Johnson story was he got interviewed by the media after the game, and he said he was very confused because after he caught the touchdown, and it was an unbelievable catch, the crowd starts chanting MVP, MVP, MVP. And he's like, why are they chanting MVP for me? I didn't do anything all year long. And then one of his teammates was like, hey, man, it's for Baker Mayfield. So just a funny one from Tez Johnson. Check out my recap show that drops every single Monday morning. Check out my Start Sit show with Graham Barfield right here. And then we have a guest show every single week. This week, it's actually going to be Ryan Heath and Graham Barfield and I breaking down rest of season rankings updates. And you get access to the rest of season rankings updates, all of our amazing articles and tools on fantasypoints.com. You get Tom's incredible gambling picks and articles. You get everything we're putting out there from the waiver wire, from Tom, from myself. You get Scott Barrett's Everything Report. One of the best values you can find in fantasy football is a Fantasy Points subscription. Use the code Theo for 15% off any package. Got to talk about Michael Mayer here. It's the theme of the show. Brock Bowers banged up. Thankfully, Vegas is actually sitting him. They played him injured earlier in the year. We don't want to mess with our long-term Bowers exposure. Michael Mayer, though, 30% target share. This was an offense that was not taking shots downfield. I think it was deep into the game before they had a pass attempt over 10 yards. But Mayer, with the bottom line stats, were very, very solid this past week. Your thoughts on adding him and your enthusiasm level for a player that was drafted inside of the second round a few years ago, drafted right around guys like Sam Laporta and Dalton Kincaid. A lot of promise when he came into the league. Your thoughts on Mayer in any week that Bowers is out moving forward? Let's start with you, Tom.
Yeah, I like it a lot here. It looks like the Raiders are finally doing the right thing by Bowers. They tried to, and a lot of it sounds like Bowers was trying to do it himself, trying to play through this PCL injury. You need rest, and he's finally doing it. They have a bye coming up in week 8, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to rush him out there to play in week 7 against the Chiefs. So I think we're going to get another Michael Mayer week. And as you said, 30% target share. We just don't see that happening for tight ends. We know the struggles right now with Jacoby Myers. Geno Smith and him have not gotten on the same page like a lot of other quarterbacks have with Jacoby Myers, but there seems to be some trust here with Michael Mayer. So 80% route share, clearly the guy at tight end for the Raiders. And we're looking ahead, 11-point spread against the Chiefs. Could be some garbage time. Could be some chasing late in the game. I think we could see Michael Mayer put up another 5 or 6 catch performance and be a very serviceable streamer at the tight end position. And we saw Sam Laporta on Sunday Night Football score a touchdown and get up over 50 yards. So the matchup is fine here against the Chiefs, and I think he's going to be very viable here, at least for another week. I think we see Bowers come back in week 9, but I do think they'll rest him through their bye. So we got one more opportunity to play Michael Mayer.
Yeah, and I think another little out here with Michael Mayer later in the year is if there's any sort of a re-aggravation for Bowers, this is not a team that we are anticipating is going to turn things around and be in some sort of playoff contention. So down the stretch, you might get another window of opportunity for Michael Mayer. And 30% target shares don't grow on trees for the tight end position. Mm-hmm. Joe, let's pivot to another tight end. A couple of weeks back, we were telling you about Oronde Gadsden as a speculative addition after his really strong performance where he had a 7-target game in week 3 against Denver. And you guys were both very, very cautious with this one, and correctly so, about how this week to week might be difficult to predict. Week 6, though, looked like it could be a turning point. It was a Quentin Johnston injury, but Oronde Gadsden ends up with 8 targets, and he catches 7 of them for 68 yards. These are 2 games for a young tight end within a 1-month period where he's looked very good. Your thoughts on Oronde Gadsden and potentially a player whose role could grow over the second half of the year, Joe?
Yeah, so the Chargers snap shares in week number 6 were strange across the board. And I'm not trying to discount Oronde Gadsden's performance, and it's good to see that he rebounded from losing a fumble early in that game. But neither Ladd McConkey nor Keenan Allen, in a game in which Quentin Johnston missed, played 60% of the snaps. Neither one of them. Keenan Allen didn't even play 50% of the snaps in that game. Oronde Gadsden was second among skill players, not named Justin Herbert, at a 67% snap share. That was behind Trey Harris. So a very strange game plan for the Chargers in a game that came down, by the way, to the final possession. So it's not like this was a garbage time game where they're like, all right, we already lost Quentin Johnston, let's pull the other guys out. Just an overall strange performance. But I think that probably speaks to Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman's trust level in Oronde Gadsden, that they can put him in a situation where he's the second highest snap earner on this offense in a game that was competitive throughout. So again, throw him in that deck, 6 to 18. I would think in games Quentin Johnston is healthy, he's probably going to be a little bit less effective. But this is looking like a guy they got an absolute steal on in the draft.
And Tom, just a further point on that one, Joe brings up Keenan Allen. We love what Keenan Allen has done in the early portion of the year, but Keenan Allen is an older player, and we've talked about sort of the all of these guys have contingent upside in LA if one wide receiver goes down. We saw it this past week with Johnston going down, Gadsden stepping up, McConkey having a huge week. If Keenan Allen were to go down, then I think that also potentially opens up things for Gadsden over the second half of the year. Your thoughts on that one, Tom?
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. And I think we're also seeing them kind of shift a little bit. They were playing with a lot more two tight ends on the field. They got back to full strength. Will Disley is a guy that they do like, and he was back. They kind of took Tyler Conklin out of the mix, but there was a lot of situations. Keenan was way down in snaps, as Joe said, and his routes were down. They're going to use a little bit more two tight end sets here moving forward, and it was effective in week 6 against the Dolphins. So I think Gadsden is going to continue to see this role. We saw Stone Smart kind of play a little bit last year. I think Gadsden's a better version of Stone Smart moving forward. So, and it's pretty promising across the board. The Chargers went with a lot of their younger players, and we saw them lean into Hampton before his injury. That was kind of out of necessity, but we saw it with Kimani Vidal, who we're going to touch on later, Trey Harris, and now Oronde Gadsden. So they're leaning into their young players a little bit because of all their injuries and probably concerns about their wide receivers. So I think this is a strong indication that Gadsden is here to stay, and he's making plays on his opportunities. So why shouldn't they keep throwing it to him?
Yeah, if you're a dynasty manager, Gadsden is almost a priority player to roster right now, because I think a year from now, guys, when we're doing redraft content, not even a year from now, like when we're in this coming summer, we're going to be talking about Gadsden. I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about him as a tight end 1 in redraft and a guy people are banking on being a big year 2 breakout player. The talent is there significantly, very athletic player. We're also going to talk about over the next month, guys, less than a month. November 4th is the NFL trade deadline. One player who is being speculated as a possible trade target for a few teams is Mark Andrews. It would make sense. Baltimore is a complete tailspin. Really one of the most surprising teams in a bad way this year is the Baltimore Ravens. Of course, they'll get Lamar Jackson back, but I don't think that's going to preclude them from making more moves here. If Mark Andrews is traded, what's your interest level in Isaiah Likely? And should fantasy managers be adding him as a speculative ad just in case Andrews is moved? Lamar will be back, and he does have a history here when it comes to targeting Likely in games that Andrews is missing. Joe, why don't you take this one?
Yeah, so I mean, it feels like Isaiah Likely's been a speculative ad for a number of weeks, but the thing is, I'm not really sure what new information we can really discuss here, because that was a non-functional offense the last 2 weeks. So whatever Likely's usage was, by the way, they took way too long to realize that their best option was just having Snoop Huntley out there running around. That was by far their best option over Pop Gun Arm Cooper Rush. The question here now becomes, do the Ravens over the bye rally the troops? Because it's obviously something where they can say, look, we're 1-5, but we're getting Lamar back, Kyle Hamilton, get all these guys back. And if they circle the wagons, does that mean they want to move Mark Andrews? Or do they kind of view this as we blew our load this season, and unfortunately the football gods did not have it in the cards for us. It's time to hit the reset button, at least a mini reset button, and get what they can for Mark Andrews. I don't know if I expect him to be traded, but I also think there's a chance that they go into the bye and say, we've got to change something. Defense has been the bigger problem, but we still have to change something. And then they go and Isaiah Likely comes out and it ends up being one of their top target earners. Zay Flowers, Tom, I mean, he was point shaving in that game. He lost 2 fumbles. I think one of them was charged to the quarterback, but he lost 2 fumbles effectively. Do they go and do they reassess what they're doing offensively? If that's the case, yeah, I think Isaiah Likely is a fine bench ad. But quite frankly, I'm more excited by some of the other names we've talked about.
The Ravens are huge favorites in all their games coming out of their bye, too. This is the time to be buying low. Everybody expects Lamar Jackson to be healthy coming out of the bye. And Isaiah Likely, I know he hasn't done anything in terms of counting stats so far this year, but he was up to an 80% route share in week 6. So that is very promising, up ahead of Mark Andrews, who was at 70% of the routes. So, just digging deeper into the numbers a little bit, the usage is ticking up here, which you'd expect. He missed a lot of time. He was out of the lineup for a foot injury. Those can be very tough to come back from, but he's been back for a couple weeks now, and those routes have gone up in multiple weeks in a row now. And out of the bye, he could be a pivotal part of this offense moving forward. So, and we're expecting much better things once Lamar gets back. So now would be kind of the time to buy low on Isaiah Likely. And maybe we get lucky. And Andrews, as you said, maybe he gets shipped. They were looking to trade him back in the early part of the offseason. And just like the Eagles, they didn't find any suitors for Dallas Goedert. But maybe things change here a little bit. Maybe some team would be willing to trade for him, especially now that we're halfway through the season. Some of that contract they don't have to pay for. It's already we're already we'll be 7 or 8 games into the season at that point, so the contract becomes a little bit more palatable. So maybe we see him moved. So Likely is definitely a guy to be buying low on right now.
Yeah, I'm an Isaiah Likely truther. I'm never going to quit Isaiah Likely, and I will keep my shares of Likely wherever possible. I do think at some point when he takes over, they're going to pay off, guys. They're going to pay off. Let's talk about another wide receiver, a potential fill-in player for this week. Marvin Harrison Jr., concussion. Zay Jones stepped up. Jacoby Brissett, we'll talk about in a minute, but he was impressive. Your thoughts on Zay Jones as a potential fill-in guy for a week? Was this sort of a mirage? Are you avoiding this? Would you be willing to use him? Joe?
Is Jacoby Brissett going to play this week?
I hope so.
Oh, no.
I hope so. 320
by the way,
2.
Kyler Murray, I think Jacoby Brissett threw for 320 yards. In his last 4 seasons, Kyler Murray's topped that 3 times. And look, obviously he brings other things to the offense, but hey, look, Marvin Harrison hasn't really been the player that they drafted him to be. And I know like he goes out early in that game, and who knows, maybe he's the guy we're talking about having the big game that Zay Jones had. But Jacoby Brissett kept going back to him, and Arizona is kind of mediocre on defense. They need some weapons here in the passing game. 79% snap share. Michael Wilson had a great catch down the sideline that almost set up a game winner for the Cardinals. Obviously, they turned it over on downs. It is a tougher matchup this week against the Packers for either Murray or Brissett. But nonetheless, I think Zay Jones has some lowercase kind of Kendrick Bourne-ish appeal here if Marvin Harrison can't play.
Yeah, he's interesting. Tom, let's talk about the New England wide receivers, because we had Demario Douglas with 3 catches for 71 yards and a touchdown. And then we had Kayshon Boutte, who I was all over in week 1, guys. Kayshon Boutte was a player I was extremely excited to add. I added him a bunch of places, and it's been all downhill since until, again, week 6. So he had the 16-point performance in week 1 and now a 26-point performance in week 6. Are we interested in adding either one of these players? Tom, your thoughts on this one?
Douglas, no. He's been losing some ground here in this passing game. They've elevated Stephon Diggs in recent weeks. They've been ramping him up as the season's gone on here, and now he's kind of running the most routes here right behind Boutte. So Douglas, much less so. Boutte, though, I have some interest, especially if I'm playing like a 14-team league. You could throw him into your flex spot and just kind of cross your fingers and hope that he makes a big play or two like we saw in week 1 and week 6, but the consistency probably isn't going to be there moving forward. He's out there a lot, but it hasn't really translated to production most weeks, and he's been that guy that's kind of running down the field and loosening the defense up for Stephon Diggs and Hunter Henry so far this season. But on occasion, that's going to lead to some big games if Drake May does uncork it deep and give him some opportunities. So I have some interest in him. I did buy him coming out of week 1, and it was mostly disappointing for those couple of performances. And a lot of my 12-team leagues, he was cut in the last couple of weeks. So I probably won't be going back to Boutte in my 12-team leagues, but 14-team leagues and above, I could see him potentially being a flex play for you.
The highlight of Kayshon Boutte's season was week 1, week 6, and getting me to rap on one of these Fantasy Football Daily podcasts with Graham Barfield. Boutte, rocket everywhere. It now sort of lives in infamy because of what he did after I did it. But yeah, I mean, at least he's on the field. Douglas, I think it's just a little bit of a mirage here. He's just a roster clogger. But Boutte, I think if Diggs were to miss some time, he'd have some value. He's on the field a lot. Again, he's done it twice now this season. We'll keep an eye on him. Also mentioned Jalen Coker. Sounds like he's near to a return. We talked about him for a number of weeks as a guy you can stash on your bench. Alec Pierce, if you need depth, he was back this week. All right, guys, let's talk about it. Musical chairs with the Arizona Cardinals running backs. Last week, we were talking about Michael Carter, how impressive he was in week 5. Well, he did have 2.9 yards per carry, and I think it was a little bit of self-scouting on Arizona's part to get Bam Knight involved. And he was. Bam Knight had some decent moments, scored a touchdown. Your thoughts on adding Bam Knight to your fantasy rosters, Joe?
I mean, it looks like he's going to be, at the very least, a part-time back until Trey Benson returns, if not more than that. Emeka Egbuka is dealing with an ankle injury. Michael Carter started the game, by the way. So while Bam Knight was indeed more involved, Michael Carter was still the starter. I think it's going to be a hot hand situation. And I guess you said the self-scouting. They determined Bam Knight might end up being the better player for what they need. I would say that was the case here in week number 6 in a close one with the Colts. Just maybe a little bit more of a goal line type of back, more of a grinder. He also had a 20-yard reception. And Michael Carter had himself a solid game. You know, he had 64 yards from scrimmage, but it looks like Bam Knight is going to get the first crack at the goal line, and that would make him the more appealing player for me if I have to use one of these two.
Honestly, we need to hope that Emeka Egbuka stays out of the mix here for a little bit. He did pick up an ankle injury. If we can at least have a 2-man backfield, maybe we can get serviceable, like high-end RB3 production out of both Knight and Carter moving forward. Carter kind of playing those passing situations and mixing in with Bam Knight. But if Egbuka is back, Bam Knight would be the only guy I'd really want to play in a given week, because I do think Carter and Egbuka would probably cannibalize each other a little bit. And at least with Knight, you're just hoping that he gets a goal line opportunity or two and he can convert. But if this is going to be a 3-man backfield for the, however long Trey Benson's out, it's probably at least 3 or more games or so with his injury. It's going to be one of those situations. It's Knight or nothing if Egbuka is involved.
One of the players, and we stream the entire NFL draft here on Fantasy Points YouTube. I was on the whole time. It was so much fun with Brett Whitefield, Thomas Tipple, and then the two of you guys were in for a big portion of it. One guy that I know that there was a lot of collective enthusiasm company-wide for was Jarquez Hunter. When he was selected by the LA Rams, Scott Barrett talked about him. I talked about him. Brett Whitefield did. We also saw him down in Mobile, guys, at the Senior Bowl. It's been all Blake Corum all year long. And this seems like maybe it's a trend with McVay, where last year it was Ronnie Rivers sort of boxing out Blake Corum. This year we've seen Blake Corum take a big step forward. But even if they were apprehensive to use Jarquez Hunter, he's going to at least have short-term contingent upside, because Blake Corum is now dealing with an ankle injury. We'll find more about that this week, guys. But your interest in adding Jarquez Hunter here, Joe, let's start out with you on that one.
Yeah, let's keep an eye on Blake Corum. Blake Corum came out and in that game on the designated drive that he played against the Ravens. I thought he looked like he had a lot of juice. And then he and Puka Nacua limped off the field at virtually the same time. I do believe Blake Corum returned to the game, if I'm not mistaken. But again, the Rams put Puka Nacua back in that game, and I don't think he's going to play this weekend. This is a deeper league only type of thing for me, Theo. Dynasty for sure. But I don't think Blake Corum is severely injured at this point, Tom.
No.
So I still think Blake Corum's ahead of Jarquez Hunter.
Yeah, we'll see. He might not be able to play this week, but they do have the bye after the London game. So we're probably not going to get the opportunity to play Hunter this week as the handcuff. So, and I would expect that Corum would be back to 100% after their bye. So this would be only a very deep league to add him, because I think the depth chart in Los Angeles will go back to status quo very quickly.
Yeah, Blake Corum's been really, really strong this year. He's looked good running the football. It's just the value of that role, the running back, the starting running back under Sean McVay in LA. Once sort of the injury bug is opened up, It's a situation where if you need a dart throw lottery ticket type player at the end of your bench, you can do far worse than being a potential RB1 at some point for a Sean McVay-led offense. We saw ramped up usage this week for Tyjae Spears. Tennessee's a dumpster fire. You're interested in adding Spears shares to your rosters here, Tom?
Yeah, I think he should be at. It was quite a stark difference from what we saw last week. He played quite a bit. It was basically a 50-50 split. He actually logged more snaps than Tony Pollard. So they really wanted to get him in passing situations. And let's face it, this Tennessee team is going to be playing from behind most weeks. I have them, power rated as the worst team. They lost another game, embarrassing fashion to Las Vegas last week. Didn't even really, they weren't even really competitive in that game. So this is going to be a situation where he could, push Pollard for a lot of snaps moving forward. And now we just got to get Cam Ward to throw the ball a little bit more to the running backs. He did this past week to Spears. He had 4 receptions. Maybe we can get some design targets for him. But Spears is, we have that handcuff upside as well. If Pollard would go down at any point, I would expect Spears to take over most of the work. So we only have 2 teams on bye right now, but I think the heavy bye weeks are coming in week 8, where we're going to be sitting like 4 teams at a time. So we could start to be desperate enough to put a Tyjae Spears in the lineup in flex spots. And if he's going to be out there a lot playing in passing situations, he could be valuable to your team over the next couple of weeks.
Let's keep in mind, by the way, that they might have lost Calvin Ridley for some time. And while it's not a 1-to-1 position, I mean, they were a passing offense that was led by Van Jefferson in week 6. That's not viable in the NFL. So I wonder if Tyjae Spears is going to get more work just because they need some level of explosiveness. And by the way, let's not forget that we are getting to the time of year we might get the new coach dead cat bounce, right? Like could Brian Callahan get fired? And there's just a little bit of a bounce in morale for the organization. Somebody who gets different ideas coming up there. That could be something that works as well for them, but it's not pretty right now.
Yeah, Brian Callahan is definitely dead man walking at this point. Getting over to one of the worst teams in the NFL, we'll continue the bad team talk here. Talked about the Titans. Let's talk about the New York Jets. Breece Hall, 22 carries, 59 yards. This offense was completely broken against Denver, completely mismanaged the clock at the end of the first half. The Jets wasted a really strong effort from their defense and their special teams against Denver. One of the ugliest games of the entire weekend. But at the end of the day, the Jets can't win a game, and Breece Hall might get traded. Isaiah Davis, we talked about him last week. I'll give a reminder. Isaiah Davis, you can stash him on your bench if Breece Hall gets traded or gets injured. Isaiah Davis, I think, would see potentially like for like usage, especially would see some catching opportunities out of the backfield, and would probably handle 15 plus carries the way this team is shaped right now, guys. We'll mention Jaden Blue. Now Miles Sanders is done for the season. Jaden Blue is like the number 2 back in Dallas. And we got to talk about Kimani Vidal, because last week we sort of told you to add both backs when Haskins and Vidal, see where this thing shook out. Most of these guys were picked up, but if Vidal is available in your league, Tom, is this a 50% FAAB type play? And where are we at? I'll give you that question, and then we'll get Joe's opinion as well. It's how much FAAB should you spend on him? And is he an RB2 moving forward? I talked about him on my reaction show, and I sort of took that take that with the usage we saw in the passing game, running about 50% of routes at 11% target share, and the opportunities compared to Haskins, I think he's on that RB2 line moving forward. Your thoughts, Tom?
I'm with you. I think he looked like the far more explosive player. I think they came into the game. Let's see how it goes. I wrote in the waiver wire report last week. We did give Haskins the slight edge, but that was going to be a hot hand approach, and Kimani Vidal picked up the hot hand pretty quickly, and he kind of ran away with the job in week 6. So I would expect him to get the first opportunities moving forward, as long as he doesn't fumble or do something stupid. I think he has RB2 potential. We saw Omarion Hampton really succeeding in that role. And I think, Vidal kind of is running with this job. And we did get the report that Hampton, there's some concern there. It sounds like this could be not just a regular ankle injury. It could be the high ankle variety. There's, speculation that he could miss more than the 4 games. And they do have a week 12 bye. So maybe they try to, rest Hampton through that week 12 bye. And that's 5 more games or so, 5 more games for potentially Vidal as the lead back here. So I would be spending up for him. We don't know if we're going to get many opportunities like this in a good offense like the Chargers. But I do think we're still going to see Haskins mixing in here. I think this, 65-35 split will probably continue moving forward. So I don't think he's going to completely run away with it and be like a bell cow type of back here for the next 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, I think that's a very strong take. I do think that the fact that we're in the middle of the year, if you've been holding your FAAB and you need to spend it on somebody, I think he's definitely one to do it with. And I think it's not going to be a situation like a Michael Carter where you're going to see things. I think that we're pretty much seeing it. It's the passing down work that was so beneficiary to Hampton's rise that I think Vidal has a huge edge on. And again, he looked really, really good as a runner. So I do think this is a big FAAB, push the chips in type guy. If you're holding FAAB, to take a chance that you're going to get more weeks where you're getting, top 18 running back value. Your thoughts on this one, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's Vidal, and you got to pay for him. And the Omarion Hampton injury was kind of a strange one because all the Twitter doctors who often are right, like they're often right, and you give them credit, but all of them were like, yeah, this doesn't seem like much of anything when they saw him go down. So when he landed on IR, I was like a little, oh boy, what the heck happened here? And now there's the report that he might be gone. Tom, you mentioned the week 12 bye. What if he's gone until week 13? This is an injury that's just crushed my fantasy teams. And Vidal, yes. Last week there was the talk Haskins was going to be the lead back, and he played for Harbaugh at Michigan and all that stuff. And people are and then there's the report on Sunday morning that Haskins is going to be the lead guy, and none of it came to fruition. So hopefully you avoided the Haskins bullet and you can pivot to Vidal if Vidal's even available, which Theo, you like the term "not in my league, bro." I'm guessing Kimani Vidal's a not in my league, bro, for a lot of people.
I checked all my leagues to try to find that one sliver of hope. And last week, I found one dynasty league where somebody had dropped a Rico Dowdle and he was available after the 200-yard explosion. With this one, no, not in my league, bro. No Kimani Vidal's. But if he's available in your league, listen to Tom. Make sure you're reading Tom's article. Make sure you're reading my article. And we want to keep you at least a week ahead. And I think it gets more and more important for us in fantasy to try to be a week ahead, because Tom's alluded to this several times on the show. You're going to get to the heavy bye weeks coming up, guys, where those are really difficult to deal with. Let's talk about a quarterback, though, that you might be able to use in some of those bye weeks. Last week, we talked about the Sam Darnold 4-touchdown explosion in that unbelievable shootout game between Seattle and Tampa Bay. Sam Darnold did it again this week. He's going to have now back-to-back strong QB1 finishes. We're recording this before Monday Night Football, so I'm not giving you where he's at in the quarterback scoring right now, but more likely than not, he's going to finish as a QB1 once again. The connection he has with Jackson Smith and Jigba looks unbelievable. JSN looks like a league winner at the wide receiver spot, and Clint Kubiak seems to know what he's doing here. Tom, your thoughts on adding Sam Darnold? Are you starting to get a little more comfortable with the idea of having to use him in a single QB format if you were against the wall?
I am, and he's played extremely well. They're not even throwing it that much. That was my concern with him earlier this season, that if the efficiency dips, there's just not enough volume for him to get there. And he has kind of proven me wrong here with some of his performances the last couple of weeks. Multiple touchdowns in 4 of his last 5 games. He's kind of been a little bit matchup proof, but that will be tested this week. This is a big week for him. Has a tough Houston matchup, but he does get it at home. I know some people will be looking for quarterbacks this week. We got Josh Allen on bye. Lamar Jackson has been out the last couple of weeks, but he's also on bye. So I think Sam Darnold, worthy of a pickup here. And You said about Jackson Smith and Jigba might be the league-winning receiver, but Cooper Kupp hasn't played terribly as the number 2 wide receiver. We're getting some production from Torrey Horton, and all of a sudden, AJ Barner, he scores just about every week or makes a big play or two. So that receiving core was also a big reason why I was a little bit concerned for Sam Darnold. But this offense is playing so well. It's schemed up great by Clint Kubiak, and Darnold's playing at such a high level that they've kind of overcome some of these concerns that I've had. So I think he's a strong pickup right now. He continues to play at a very high level.
And we talked about Michael Penix last week. We're recording this before Monday Night Football. But if this thesis holds up, and this is sort of like, is it an indoor environment? Is it a home environment? Penix has 2 QB1 finishes, one in week 1 and one in week 4, both home games. He's got a home game against Buffalo on Monday night, and then he's got a home game in week 8 against Miami. I think he's an interesting one. Joe, your thoughts on Bryce Young and what you saw? Carolina is now undefeated at home. We saw the connection with Tetairoa McMillan. Rico Dowdle has just been unbelievable. Your thoughts on Bryce Young here after a 3-touchdown performance? The yardage, not necessarily that impressive, but the efficiency was.
Why would the yardage be impressive when Rico Dowdle is the second coming of Earl Campbell over the last 2 weeks? That's my question.
Dalvin Cook.
Graham Barfield would vehemently disagree with me on this, but I think there's something there with Bryce Young, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's going to be a top 5 quarterback, but I'm interested to see what you guys think, because I think his confidence level resembles the player he was at the end of last year, even if he's had a couple of bad games. Jalen Coker's coming back, and that would mean fewer snaps for Xavier Legette, which as much as I like Xavier Legette as a person, it feels like that would be good for this offense. Tetairoa McMillan has been great for them. So Bryce Young can still run around. So there's an opportunity for him in certain games when, the pressure's getting to him. He can run around and dissect. He threw an interception, by the way, against the Cowboys, but it wasn't his fault. It went off the hands of McMillan. So I think he's playing at a pretty high level. He's got, I would just say, a mediocre schedule coming up. He goes at the Jets, who, Theo, you mentioned wasted a good defensive performance. Buffalo, which could be a high-scoring environment. At Green Bay, which is not a good matchup. And then home against New Orleans, which is a good matchup. But I think you can do worse than Bryce Young, especially if Jalen Coker comes back and makes an impact.
Tom, take this one.
Yeah, I'm not as high on Bryce Young as Joe. I wish he was running a little bit more. That was where he was getting a lot of his production at the end of last season. The passing yards, I mean, he's top 200 yards just once so far. We need a little bit more passing yardage production from him, but he has made some progress here. And we're going to get Jalen Coker back in the middle of the field. I think that does help things out. And having Rico Dowdle kind of solidified the running back position. I think it's elevating the entire offense up another notch here. I was really worried about it kind of bottoming out, but I think since Rico Dowdle's been in there, the entire offense is playing at a little bit higher level. But honestly, I would probably rather try to take a chance on like a JJ McCarthy, who's been dropped a lot. They're around similar type of ownership in Yahoo leagues. I would expect him back. It was a rough first couple of weeks for him, but he's kind of been out of sight, out of mind here for the last month. But I'd be willing to pick him up and see if I can get something over the next couple of weeks with him.
Yeah, I'm sort of with Tom on this one, where last year with the smash weeks we saw over the second half of the year all involved Bryce Young scoring a bunch of rushing touchdowns, getting some rushing yards. If we see that return, I think he'd be on the streaming radar. I do think it's becoming a more functional offense. Like you said, great point on Dowdle sort of making things all sort of come together here. You get back Coker. You're going to get back Jatavian Sanders soon. I think the offense, and of course, Tetairoa McMillan is getting better and better each and every week. So second half of the year, this could just be a fun offense. And the offensive ecosystem could sort of support Bryce Young getting you through a bye week or two. Let's talk about Jacoby Brissett. Joe, you take this one. Of course, Kyler Murray could come back this week, but Brissett was really good. Anytime you have 320 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns, we have to talk about you. We saw Mac Jones really help fantasy managers as a fill-in. How about Jacoby Brissett? If he gets another week, are you at least very excited about using him in like a super flex format? Your thoughts here?
No, it's the Packers this week, which isn't great.
There you go.
So I'm not terribly enthused about it because the one thing Brissett is mobile, and if you could tee off on him in the pocket, he will make mistakes. So I wouldn't be terribly excited, but obviously any starting quarterback is viable in the Superflex format.
Well, there you go. This was a lot of fun. We covered a ton. Make sure you're checking out Tom's Waiver Wire article over at Fantasy Points. Make sure you're checking out my Waiver Wire coverage over at Fantasy Points. You can get any package at Fantasy Points now using the code Theo for 15% off. Stick with us here at Fantasy Football Daily. If you're listening to this show on the podcast, come and give us a subscription to YouTube. We are the fastest growing YouTube channel in fantasy for a reason. We're dropping videos that can help you win in fantasy every single day, and sometimes multiple videos a day. Stick with us at Fantasy Football Daily rest of the week. School of Scott podcast, Scott Barrett and myself, and then Dynasty Life, my Dynasty podcast. Alan Soslowski of RotoWire will be my guest this week. We're everywhere here at Fantasy Points. We're going to help you crush your fantasy leagues this season.